In the name of God, who brings us together, who holds us together, and who sends us out for ministry in the world together. Amen. Please be seated. My mind has been on Bishop Barbara Harris a lot lately. She came up as a clue on Jeopardy last week, so every Episcopalian on social media seems to have chimed in about that. Again, I thought of her when I was hanging some new art in my office earlier this week. One piece that I had had on my desk, but I finally hung up after a while, is a reproduction of an icon of Bishop Harris that was commissioned by the Diocese of Missouri. Then she came to mind again because just yesterday was the anniversary of her ordination and consecration as a bishop. 34 years. There were even a few other smaller times this week when she crept into my thoughts and attention. My friends who are spiritually intuitive will tell you when someone is breaking through your consciousness like that, and that often, it's a sign. It's time to give them some attention. If you don't know about Bishop Harris, you should, and soon you will. She was the first woman who was ordained a bishop in the Episcopal Church, or even anywhere in the global Anglican Communion, anywhere in this 2,000-year tradition of apostolic succession. So her ordination was a really big deal. The security officials at that ordination insisted that she wear a bulletproof vest during the liturgy because there were so many credible threats against her life. There was even a plan in place to have 3 other bishops join her in the ambulance if she were shot, so that the ordination could continue no matter what. Bishop Harris was a spitfire if there ever was one. She was a short African-American woman from Philadelphia. She had piercing wit and wisdom that could cut through anything thrown at her. She smoked like a chimney and cussed like she didn't care because, quite honestly, she didn't. I was at a small dinner party with her one time back in 2008. It was just before the Lambeth Conference of Bishops that year, where all the bishops of the Anglican Communion around the world come together once every 10 years for study and relationship building. I would be attending the conference that year, working with a group of lobbyists for LGBT inclusion. But it was the first time in nearly 2 decades that Bishop Harris hadn't been there. She attended in 1988 when she was elected, but not yet consecrated. And then she attended again in 1998 when as one of the 1,000 or so bishops there, she was one of only 11 women. But by this Lambeth conference in 2008, she was retired and wouldn't be attending. Wanting to engage with her, I asked, Bishop Harris, will you miss being at the Lambeth conference this year? I'll never forget her response. Hell no. She practically screamed at me through her smoker's rasp. I wouldn't go if Jesus Christ himself were there handing out $1,000 bills. We all laughed because she had just that way of putting things just so. But the fact of the matter is, one of the biggest points of this conference that she was so eager to not attend is the role it plays in helping to build relationships around the Anglican Communion. For Bishop Harris, though, interacting with her colleagues from around the world only served to sever those relationships, to further damage them. She told stories of how the other bishops there had been downright cruel to her, refusing to acknowledge that she was, in fact, a bishop at all. Excuse me. They would speak about her in her presence as if she wasn't really there. They would tell her to her face that she didn't belong and she should go home and find a husband. nothing short of a hostile environment. I thought of that story again this week because in this gospel reading, the teachings of Jesus, as challenging as they can be to hear, have a common theme running throughout them. They are about our relationships with each other. They were a call to action from Jesus to do better than just the bare minimum. To go above and beyond, to not just tick the boxes of proper behavior, but to actually honor our relationships with one another. By thinking deeply, not just about the points of law, but about the spirit of the law. The ways these rules of life from our faith are meant to lift us up into our better selves. It's not enough to avoid killing people, or to honor your relationship with your spouse, or even to tell the truth. We are called by God to do all of that and more. Not just because Jesus said so, but because that was God's intention all along. God's intention was that we love one another. These are ways of living together in love. Finally, there is this last line, let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. You shouldn't even need to swear to the truth because your yes should just mean yes. Your no should just mean no. It's not more complicated than that. How many times do we attempt to skirt around challenging conversations with people by searching for loopholes in our language, or failing to say what we actually believe to be true? Of course, we're not called to be unnecessarily mean to one another. Not about honestly held opinions wielded as a weapon. But it is about being real with one another. Brene Brown says in her book, Dare to Lead, that in her office, one of the things she insists upon is direct, honest communication. Something isn't working, it doesn't help anyone to try to skirt around it. In fact, that will only lead to resentment. We're not being nice when we obscure important communications to make life less uncomfortable. She says, clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. We want to be kind to one another, but communicating our needs and expectations without clarity isn't kind. It's actually the opposite. It may be more uncomfortable in the moment, but it isn't kind. Bishop Harris was good at those clear, kind communications. She could be clear even when it wasn't comfortable for those people around her, or even for herself. She was like Jesus in that way. Following Jesus isn't and never has been about making everyone happy. It's more about kindness. Jesus doesn't call us to comfort, but to kindness. Some of what we read today may make us uncomfortable. But striving to incorporate the teachings of Jesus into our lives will make us more kind, whether we like it or not. Amen.